Following up on my video last week looking at the Ring Wraith Deluxe Horse and Rider set, this week I thought I'd turn my attention to a slightly different combination, and this is Sharku with Warg Beast. So this is more of a Warg and Rider set, and it's pretty cool, quite different for this line, and a really nice addition. As we saw last week, I really like these deluxe editions, and as I said, I felt that ToyBiz were really at the top of the game at this point in their career, I suppose, for lack of a better word, because they were experimenting, doing all sorts of crazy, wonderful, trend-setting stuff, which laid the foundations for what was to come over the next few years in the 6-inch line of action figures. And yeah, this was very experimental, but absolutely lovingly put together. And yeah, let's take a closer look. If we start off by looking at the packaging, of course, we can see that this is quite familiar to what we saw last week. It does have the blue packaging. This time, it's specifically from the Two Towers. We have the runes down the side panels there of the packaging, and then, of course, in the background, we can see the Middle-earth map. We have an image of Sharku with the Warg on the left-hand side, so taken directly from the film, and then most of this is given over to the wonderful window display showing the figure inside. Now these are very chunky boxes, so they have a nice thick side panel. Again, we have the Lord of the Rings logo, and we have this fantastic production image at the bottom there, this photo of the toys taken by ToyBiz, which looks really fun and exciting. So this looks really good on the shelf. And then the reverse of the packaging has some information about the film, about these characters. It has some details on how to get the most out of the action features, which we'll come to. We have that image again writ large at the bottom of the packaging, which is very, very cool, this time pointing out some of the various features. And then close up, if we look, we can see the other figures in this deluxe line as well. We can see Aragorn and Brago from the Return of the King, and we have Legolas as well, which all look fantastic, very nicely photographed and quite exciting. So starting with Sharku himself, a very interesting figure, of course, not your typical human character. This is an orc, and he looks pretty grim and terrifying all in all, very goblin-like. I think they've done a really very, very nice job both with the sculpt and the paint taps on this figure in particular. If we start by looking at this head sculpt, wow, this is really, really detailed. We can see so many details here. Look at his teeth, for example, and look how wonderfully painted they are. There's so much texture and detailing on these paint taps, which is amazing to get from a sculpt like this. And there's just so much detail. We can see various lines and scars and cuts and grooves. This very craggy face, and it just looks immense. I think they've done a tremendous job. And this attention to detail extends throughout the entire figure. We can see there's lots of individual scars and cuts on this figure, but the paint washes are excellent. This real textured, dirty look to this figure, like he's been through the mud. He's had a few battles. He looks like he's seen a bit of action, and yeah, this is fantastic. I think this looks really, really good. We've seen lots of different colours and washes running through this figure, which is fantastic. Likewise, if we look at the back of the figure, we can see obviously where he's got his big fur coat there. We can see all the individual hairs. We can see a number of different colours in there as well to make this feel textured and real and authentic. The only problem with this is that he does have this big giant thing sticking out of his back. That is, of course, for the action feature, so it does compromise the look a little bit if you put him in a display. Again, if we look at the legs, we can see a lot of detail, nice sculpting and nice paint taps here. This looks really cool. The only downside to the legs is that in order for him to be able to ride the Warg, they've made them out of rubber, so you can't really get much posability, and we'll see that when we look at the articulation. But moreover, the bigger downside is the fact that he's very difficult to stand freely. I've managed to do it, but he has a tendency to want to fall over. Now, he does have that action feature, of course, so when you push that button in his back, it does make his arm swivel, so he has that sort of slashing action with that dagger blade that he has there, which is quite cool. I don't think it's strictly necessary, but it does add an extra fun feature to this figure. In terms of articulation, he's got a swivel at the neck, so he can move his head from side to side. It's a little bit compromised by the hair piece that he's got there. That is a solid piece, but thankfully his rubber backpack, his fur coat there, is a rubber piece, so that doesn't compromise being able to move the head from side to side, nor does it impact on the ball joint in the shoulder, which allow this arm to lift up and out, which is pretty healthy range of motion there, which is fantastic. Single joint at the elbow, so that arm can bend forwards and backwards a little bit, and then there's another straight swivel at the wrist, which allows that wrist to rotate 360 degrees. Another swivel at the waist there, so of course he can spin from side to side. He has another swivel at the top of his thigh, so it's kind of diagonal. I'm not a big fan of this joint, to be honest. It's fairly redundant, doesn't really help. Obviously, he needs to be able to sit on the Warg, but it's not really conducive to articulation. And then he's got a complementary thigh swivel as well. Again, this is fairly redundant and doesn't really do very much. Okay, so moving on to the Warg himself. This is very, very cool. A very different kind of creature for this line. A lot of the other deluxe sets, of course, were horses in different shades with different personalities, but this obviously is a very different beast altogether. This head sculpt is absolutely brilliant. It's just look at those teeth, that tongue, and that mouth there. It's blood red. Fantastic sculpting, fantastic paint apps. And we see this throughout the entire figure. We can see that on his mane there. We can see obviously all the individual hairs, but then all the different colours. We can see gold and brown and darker browns, and it just looks fantastic all in all. I think they've done a really lovely job. Then we can even see the tail, obviously, which is quite short. So this has a little bit of articulation in the sense that it can be rotated around. But all in all, this is very, very impressive. Of course, everything about this figure is absolutely unique. There's nothing else like this in the rest of the line, or any other line for that matter. So when we're looking at the legs as well, these are very, very different legs to what we saw with the horse, and of course they have a completely unique sculpt when it comes to those paws and the claws there. Not to be outdone, the Warg also has an action feature. If you press this button on the back of his hind leg, you can see that it makes his jaw move up and down. I think this looks really, really cool. Absolutely fantastic feature, and just really adds this already very impressive figure. He is also articulated, so he does have a swivel at the top of his legs, so his legs can move forwards and backwards a pretty good distance. Those front legs also have a single joint at the knee, I suppose, that move forwards and backwards, and there's also another pivot at the very bottom of the paw as well, so the paw can move up and down. There's slightly more articulation in the hind legs. Again, they can move forwards and backwards. There's extra articulation at the top of the leg and at the bottom of the leg, which allows the leg to really extend out or curl up, which is fantastic. And then of course we have that hinge for the paws as well. And when you put them together by placing Sharku on top of the Warg, they make quite an impressive pair and very overbearing. So these are quite monstrous, and they look absolutely fantastic. Again, fantastic detail, wonderful paint apps, great articulation, and even some action features thrown in there to boot. I think this is a really fantastic set, very, very different to anything else that we have in either this collection or any other toy collection. I think that's what makes them so wonderful and so fun. They're versatile and different, and just fantastic to put on display. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.